Welcome to the Beyond Green 365 podcast. This podcast educates homeowners on how to make healthier choices when updating, remodeling, or building a new home. Step Beyond Green to Healthy supports, advocates, and educates for healthier indoor environments. We make every effort to offer healthier options and learning opportunities. However, our assistance is not specific medical advice for any one person and/or medical condition. For specific medical advice, please contact your physician. The content provided by Step Beyond Green to Healthy is for your information only. Any application of this information is your responsibility entirely. Here is your host, Jonathan Synovic.
Welcome, everybody out there, to the Beyond 365 podcast. I'm with Randy Miller of Allrite Remodeling. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Great to be on here with you.
We're going to be actually hearing a lot from Randy over all these podcasts. Randy has graciously agreed to step in whenever we needed him to be some comic relief. So we're really excited about that.
Well, yeah, because this face is made for radio, but hey, I can do what I have to do in order to help the cause.
Excellent. So we're here educating homeowners about healthier choices that they can make when they're remodeling, upgrading, or building. And I'm excited because we're going to talk about ventilation today a little bit. But before we kind of get into that, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it?
Sure. So as Jonathan had mentioned, I own Allrite Home and Remodeling and also S&E Insulation. We're a family-run home improvement company. We specialize in roofing, siding, windows, gutters, doors, decks, and S&E is a full insulation company. Been recognized many times for our accomplishments over the years, from awards locally to nationally. We were recognized by the Department of Energy for how many homes we actually made energy efficient as well. So very active in NARI, very active in the Department of Energy, or our Focus on Energy program here in this area. And my business has now been around for 51 years, and I'm proud to say I'm the second generation owner in my family, and my son is involved, looking to be the third.
Wow. That's pretty incredible when you think about the way the last couple of years have been. I mean, if you think about it, I know a lot of colleagues in the industry have left it. We hit the recession. We hit sometimes a near second generation, but It doesn't make it easier. I mean, people think, oh, well, it's been around, so that just means you're just going to make it through it. But it's been tough for a lot of companies, and I think that kind of plays into how the culture's changed. I mean, don't you think?
The business itself needs to end up evolving. I don't care what business it is. I mean, there's just so many changes that end up going on, like you just had mentioned, that you need to be paying attention as the owner of what's actually going on and adapting to it. Making sure that you're well educated on what's going on in the industry and the world around you.
For sure. And when we think about healthy, that's really been a biggest change for Step Beyond Green. It's been around 8 to 9 years now, but really it's only been in the last 4 to 5 years that we've really gotten some really good push from the environment around us, the culture change, the idea that maybe there are things that are happening within our homes that are not the healthiest. And science has come a long way. I tell people that's probably the biggest help, is that we're able to prove some of these things. Before it was all like theory, like, hey, I don't know, why do we have mold in the basement? Not really sure why. What if we just eliminate water, they'll take care of it, right? Well, maybe, but what's causing the water? Well, it's got to be just a downspout or something, or it's got to be, it's always something simple, and it really isn't always something simple.
No, I mean, you do have to dig in and make sure that you're figuring out where the root cause is, what's really doing it. It could be a condensation problem. It's not necessarily that water is coming in from the outside, from an outside source. You may have a house that's so tight and not ventilating or too well insulated, but you don't have things that are working properly. There's just so much to it. Maybe they're not changing their filtration systems regularly. Maybe they're not putting fans on. All of that ends up adding up to what becomes an unhealthy home. And it's a big problem if people don't end up thinking about it and addressing it. Do you agree?
I 100% agree. In fact, take a moment, if you're listening, and think about, especially during the lockdown portion. I mean, we had the first 30 days, and then we kind of got 60 days into it. And think about the second 30 days. So in our research, you have to be in an environment constantly for anywhere from 8 to 12 hours or more.
Sure.
So in a typical home scenario, that would be, you'd probably be reaching that at about the time you'd wake up and go to work.
Right.
So you're changing environments, you're going outside, you're doing all these different things. And now we weren't. So now you're constantly in this environment almost because everything was shut down 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on top of, we have all this technology now.
Sure.
So not only do we have the house impact, but now we're in Wi-Fi and we're doing these hard connects and we're constantly have all of this stuff going on. I was receiving phone calls, not so much in the first 30 days, but I started receiving phone calls from individuals that know me that go, hey, you know what? We haven't been exposed to it, but we don't feel well. We're all of a sudden we're stuffy. I'm constantly getting a headache. Do you have any thoughts on that? And I was like, absolutely have thoughts
Lots
on
of
that.
thoughts.
And to your point, it's we are starting to now understand that our environment can affect us. And the environment I was like, well, have you opened up any windows? Have you got any fresh air in there? And they're like, well, it's been cold. So no, I mean, we've not really done it. I said, well, we're getting a couple of warm days. Try it, open it up for about 4 to 5 hours a day. Let that fresh air go on out. Let it go for 3 or 4 days. Let me know if anything changed. Sure enough, a couple of days later, the guys call me back. They're like, wow, night and day.
Yeah.
And so I started to ask about their history. And sure enough, they had re-insulated, they had done windows, but they're still sitting with the furnace, from 20 years ago. No fresh air intakes, didn't think about the bathroom fans. There's more people showering every day now, right? Everybody's home. Sure. So you got and you're cooking every day because we weren't going out to eat. I mean, so much changed in that environment. It was a lot of fun because we had always wanted to do an experiment like that. But there was no good way to do it, really. And sure enough, as these people would come to me with different things, it was a lot of fun helping them, feel better.
I mean, even the simplest of things, like taking out your garbage more frequently because of the fact that it's in your environment that you're in 24/7. I mean, that had to end up changing if you weren't even adapting and changing even the simplest things of that and turning on fans and opening up windows and, taking vitamin D because you're not getting outside.
Yep.
That's been brought up many, many, many times over the last year of vitamin D is, something to end up helping you. So yeah. It's interesting as far as where we're at right now and where the cause that you have established, seems to be going in the right direction because more and more people need to be more aware and in tuned of what's going on in their environment around them. And their home is the first place it's got to start with.
And I think if we think back years ago when we first met, we started talking about this, I don't know that it was actually on the forefront of your mind of what I've been talking healthy and you're just like a lot of people. It's all green, right? Hey, I got green. We're good to go.
Yeah.
So we've throughout the last couple of years, what's changed in your life or your mental state to actually be on board? I mean, again, you've talked just in the last couple of minutes about, the cause. What really got you on board with the cause?
I mean, there's so many different things that I can end up mentioning. I lost my father to cancer within the last 5 years, for one. And that was tough to end up seeing. Had a grandchild within the last year, which is amazing to end up having. And maybe I'm just more in tuned with some of the health scenarios that are going on. So it was more of an aha moment once I got a clearer understanding that it's not really all about green. Green is a portion of it, but there's so many other avenues. And with my insulation division as well, that in itself, we're attempting to end up doing things as healthy as we can because our scope of work that we're actually doing is beneficial for health. Mm-hmm. But it can also end up going in the opposite direction if it's not done properly as well. So it's more that we're conscientious of the environment and what's going on around us. And I just think it makes a lot of sense.
And you actually mentioned, some of the, precautions. So the awareness and the healthy factor for your employees, I would think is another concern, is making sure that there's so many things that are out there now that are maybe not the safest. And so right. I know that some of your practices too, you've really looked into making sure that the employees are doing it every day, which is a major concern on the Step Beyond Green side, because although we want to protect you and your home, the people who do it every day actually have a much higher exposure rate in some some cases. So I know that you've taken some precautions with that as well, correct?
Oh, I mean, our systems that are in place, we want to make sure that not only that the customer ends up being safe while we're in the house as well, especially when we're using closed cell spray foam and spraying in areas that need to be closing off the air sealing portion of the house, but for my crew as well, while they're using those chemicals, and they're suited up and their families will be safe when they end up coming home at night. So they're suited, they're masked. Our PPE is all in place and properly, and we do what we can to end up making sure everything is kept clean, and we're trying to do everything the right way.
I think you said a very interesting thing there with, because I know anybody on the healthy front just heard you say spray foam, and I know that I feel the cringing in the audience, right? Because everybody goes, "Oh my gosh, we can't do spray foam." I think the key to start to understanding what we're really, as a non-for-profit, we're out there to educate people on is that in certain situations, there's going to be things that we just can't avoid,
Right.
And it might be the best way to create the healthiest environment. And so we're not here to say you should or shouldn't. Or what I like to talk to people about is the safety precautions that we're taking with product lines. And also, I know you do an amazing job of educating clients on why you're doing what you're doing. And then ultimately, it's up to the client. And that's really, when we think about the entire reason we're doing these sessions, is education. It says it right in our mission statement. We're here to educate and advocate. And the truth of it is that you can't be educated if you don't know all the different angles.
Sure. And I mean, there are different products that are out there, and we've researched some of the different ones that are available to us. We also make sure that the homeowners are aware, hey, listen, the smell that's going to be coming out here, you might be better off going for a walk while we're actually utilizing it, or leave the house for a little while, especially if you're sensitive at all. We also want to make sure that you don't come into the basement area or up into the attic area while we're spraying. I mean, my guys are suited up, you're not. So please stay away while we're actually doing these things. We mentioned that multiple different times, and it's all about the communication. And I think we do a pretty good job as far as with making sure that we're communicating with our clients and making sure that they understand what's going on.
Yeah, great. There could be a whole other show on where products come from now.
Oh, sure.
Are still a problem. I mean, I get asked about drywall, it seems like weekly. Oh, you can't get the Chinese drywall. I'm like, we really haven't had Chinese drywall since there was the catastrophe with Chinese drywall, because I think they really stopped pushing it overseas with that intention. So it's not as big of a factor, but that moment in time has solidified people to go, oh, we just got to make sure it's not Chinese drywall.
The trades is constantly evolving and changing. I mean, all the products that are out there, we're seeing manufacturers making changes. Some are good, some are bad, but if you're not trying something new, you're not going to evolve.
Sure.
And I think in our industry, that's kind of important, that we're always looking at products that are going to end up being more sustainable, something that's going to end up being healthier in a lot of ways. Just all in all is going to be better for the home fronts. And people appreciate, I think, changes. They don't like it when it fails, but sometimes that does end up happening. And as long as, again, communication ends up being there, whether it's from the manufacturer or if it's from the company that did the installation, usually problems get resolved fairly quickly.
And problems right now, moisture. I mean, I just, it doesn't matter what industry. It seems like we've got all span of trades.
Oh, sure.
But specific for you is your objective is to make sure it goes away, correct?
Well, you can't make moisture go away.
Oh, what do you mean you can't make moisture go away? There's no magic. I always well, Jonathan, isn't there a magic way to make moisture go away? And I'm like, no, it's generated all the time,
everywhere,
right?
All directions. It's in the air. You can't control it, unfortunately. Well, you try to control it,
right?
You maintain it as best you can.
I think that's the key too. Maintain, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not about getting rid of, and I think I preach that in a lot of the stuff I talk about is there is no magic pill that's going to, or no magic product that's going to make this all perfect for a house or perfect for you or perfect for anybody. What we're trying to do is identify enough of them to control the environment, maintain a healthier environment for you to live in. So it's no one product that's going to make it better. People, I'll just buy one of the air purifiers. That'll take care of it. And, and quite honestly, in that moment, in that area, depending on what you have, sure can. But when you go to the room next door,
sure,
there's no more air purifier. I mean, it's not there. And people go, oh, people don't know me out there. So I live in a small Cape Cod. It's 1,400 square feet. It's in the city. And and it's a 1940 or 1938 home. So we're talking about something old.
Crawl spaces?
I have half the basement's crawl space, half the basement is
dirt floor too, right?
No, I actually have a concrete floor. So I was a little bit better than that. But interestingly enough, funny side story is my second story. When I bought the house, I noticed that every door and all the moldings were all different. I thought, boy, that's kind of interesting. Why is it different? It turns out that during one of the wars, I don't know which one it would be at the time, they actually tore down houses that people couldn't afford, that were like old and older than even mine, and they would share the doors to homes in the area.
Really?
And so all of the houses on my block have like homes from other homes from across the street that when they tore down the block, they used it to create their second floors as a way to save money. They did it as a community. So the story goes around that they would go around from house to house and they would do another room for the family, or they do it, and they all did it as a community. So it's kind of a cool,
history.
It's kind of a cool history, but I've never been able, getting back to the moisture piece, I've never been able to get it down to that 30s.
Even during the winter months?
During the winter months, yeah.
Okay.
But summer, we're at 30 right now. I mean, again, it runs constantly and it barely gets underneath 50 right now.
What's the dew point outside?
We're in the 60s right now, aren't we?
So how are you going to end up getting it when your entire environment around you is in the 60s? How are you going to end up drawing it out and pushing it away from your home? It's not feasible because you're opening up doors, you're opening up windows, there's natural seepage that ends up coming through the house as well. So yeah, to anticipate it actually happening right now, of course not. It's just not going to happen.
So let's go back to that for a minute.
All
because
right,
I think
let's do this.
I get excited about this because I think that's a miss. I mean, even me, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get this thing down to 45 in the summer, no matter what. And here you're going, well, I mean, come on, let's put some logic into what you're doing.
Right.
And I think that's where we're told things, right? And this is what all these things are about that we're going to talk about during these series, is that we're told these things, okay, you got to get to the 30s.
Right.
Well, but it's not possible in the summer is what you just said. And you go, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. If I'm in the 60s outside and I'm trying to get half of that to get to 30, that's the likelihood of you being able to do it without a commercialized system. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are systems that could get you there. But I think that's important because I don't know that we're ever told the different types of seasons where things would be at. We're just told 30.
We're always told 30 to try and end up getting it down there. It's your attempt to end up getting it as low as you can within the household. In a perfect world, it would reach it that way during the summer, but it's not going to end up happening because we're not closing everything completely off. The other situation that ends up going on, which I find humorous, is the humidifiers that people have in the house as well. Let me caution you. If you have a humidifier and you have a dehumidifier, make sure the humidifier is off during the summer months, because there's no reason to be adding humidity when you're drawing it out and trying to get rid of that humidity on the other end of it. So you're fighting it. And even during the winter months, it's trying to get that balance. So don't set one too high in comparison to the other. I personally, and this is my personal opinion, am not a humidifier fan.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Even in the winter.
Even in the winter months.
And why is that?
Because I think you still will have enough humidity to keep the home comfortable. You may have some shocks, but again, when we end up tightening up a home with insulation and the ventilation systems that are in there, we want to end up having the movement go. We don't want to introduce more moisture into it.
I think, and you're talking about another key piece, is that when you go to tighten up, it's not really, I mean, when you tighten that, you have to look at the systems throughout the house as a whole. You can't just say, well, I'm going to tighten it up and it's going to be better.
Right.
Because, and I think we've seen technology change. The newer furnaces, if you do it with the humidifier add-on and the technology to understand that, okay, you're going to set that humidifier at a percentage. Only problem with that I found over the years is it's only good for that room. So
correct.
People go, oh, well, now I don't have to worry about overdoing that, unless you're in a room, or that thermostat's in a room that is always going to have low humidity because it's in the center of the house. Or it's not, you got plants in other rooms that are actually contributing to moisture in the air, and you're adding humidity on top of the fact that the plants are adding humidity. And so it still is a game. Back in the day when the humidifiers were at a separate thermostat, I always loved it when that like went in the basement.
Sure.
Like I come in, the humidistat is in the basement. I'm like, this is kind of an interesting thing because in the wintertime, it's going to be one of your lowest humidity zones. Yeah. Your highest humidity zones in the basement, and it's not going to turn on because you're losing it upstairs. Placement's everything with the thermostats.
Yeah. The other reason as far as with the humidifier is you kind of touched on it, but how many people are in the home? How many showers are you taking? Are you boiling water? Do you end up having plants? Do you have a fish tank that's in the house? You've got moisture that's being added to the home pretty much naturally anyways. And again, I know HVAC contractors hate when I make these statements. We've had good debates between us about these things, but their job is to introduce things that they feel is beneficial. And my job is to introduce what I feel is beneficial. So
yeah, and I think as we grow in the building science, a lot of this kind of starts to intermix with one another, because I know when I think about bathroom ventilation, we're always, we're talking about getting rid of that. That can't stay around the bathrooms, and they're constantly involving product lines that can sense humidity and get rid of humidity. But really what they're finding now is it's also air exchanges.
Yep.
So, so even though their main goal was humidity when it started, now they're finding that it's good to have those taken out. So then you've got to start balancing with like the hoods. We talk about moisture for cooking. If they're recirculating, well, then the moisture is dumping right back into the space. However, if yours is exhausting outside, now we're not dumping the moisture in. So it's a we're finding it's very complicated in that balancing act of, like what you're saying, is having not a ton of moisture in it, but that we have situations that create a ton of moisture. And in those moments, what is the system doing in a tight house, right? We're tightening these things, the windows, the walls, and now it's so if we keep them in, we can create a toxic environment. If we release too much of it, we create a toxic environment. And you're pulling things out as so it's really neat, because I think over the last, I'd say, year and a half to 2 years, there's actually some new technology that's coming out for whole house monitoring with monitoring ports throughout the house that are not just looking at a room or a sensor here. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun for us to talk in the future about some of that technology that's monitoring homes to help balance that.
And going along with that thing, to end up going about this thing blindly just makes absolutely no sense, because there's so many different avenues that can end up affecting one part of it to the other part of it. We do what we can to end up staying continually educated on the changes that end up going on, the materials that are going on, even our knowledge, to make sure that we're up to date on what the latest science that we're learning about as far as with the homes. The first thing, though, that we have found that ends up making the most sense is start out not dealing with a contractor, but have your home have an energy audit done. Do an evaluation of the home first by an individual who ends up coming in with technical equipment, infrared camera, blower doors, everything that needs to be done, so that they can actually take a look at, is the furnace working well? Are your fans working well? Do you have the proper ventilation in the house? All of these items end up adding up. Get that report. It's almost like getting a home inspector that ends up coming out and doing his thing. This is doing it based on the health of your home and basically the insulated and the energy efficiency value of that house. Don't let it be, though, the insulation contractor, the HVAC contractor. Let it be a third-party individual that just is there to report it. You're not going to let your home inspector be the guy that does any repairs for you. Why would you do that from the insulation or the HVAC side? So there are individuals that are out there that can end up doing an energy audit, and I highly recommend that.
And it shouldn't be free.
No,
I think that's, I get that I get that asked to me all the time. Well, shouldn't these people, these energy auditors, aren't they teaming with someone to do it? And I said, you really want a third-party analysis to come in, and you want to pay for that data to your point, so that you can bring someone in and either do one of two things. One is validate that they're coming up with the same ideas, but more importantly, creating a strategy to how you're going to attack things. Because I know personally, I don't have that money pile that if one day I could just come in and change over my entire house. But if I don't have a roadmap to what I'm going to do, you are going blindly. I think you said it. You want something to kind of give you that. And then another layer to that, there are building science biologists out there right now that will actually do moisture readings and VOC readings. I mean, and it's really, you're looking for kind of a complete report, especially if you're going to be in your home anywhere from 5 to 10 years or more. I mean, everybody always asks you, what's the magic number to start doing, repairs and or changes. I mean, if you're less than 5 years, you really got to be careful. And because I'm human and I'm a person too, and I got to realize that it's a resale thing, and at some point your investment isn't really going to get out of it. But every little thing that you do along the way, though, will help even the next person who owns it. So I always kind of tell people, hey, make some small investments along the way, because even if you don't you stay there, you're going to help the next person, and you're going to want someone to be doing that for you for what you're buying. But more importantly, getting that third-party analysis gives you the real snapshot, and ask the questions about it. I don't know if how when I go in to talk to someone who's had one of these done and they give me the list, I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Did they give an indication of what this means in this report? And they're like, I don't have any idea what the report says. Like, it just said red, green, yellow.
Yeah.
And they told me to take care of the red. It's okay to ask questions. I find it, even though for years at seminars, everyone's ask questions, and how afraid people are still today to ask questions. You paid for the report.
Sure.
Right?
Well, I mean, when we end up recommending the energy audit, which is every single time that we're doing an insulation project, that's one of the first steps. Once we do our initial evaluation, we always recommend that. And I always tell people, make sure that you are actually there with them, because first of all, it's kind of cool to actually look through that infrared camera and see exactly what's going on the walls. But two, you can end up asking the questions to it. I do want to correct you one.
Oh,
okay.
I love being corrected, so go right ahead.
So you had mentioned, as far as with the insulation and the return on investment and all of that, according to Remodeler magazine, did you know that you actually get a bigger return on investment on that than you do on any other home improvement project? It's actually over 100% return on investment. Don't get me wrong. It's not one of those sexy items.
Careful.
Like
where's the disclaimer? Yeah, come on. Yeah. It's not sexy.
It's not sexy like a kitchen and bath, but as far as with return on investment, there's so many different directions that you're actually saving financially on, that your return almost ends up beginning right from at the start. So,
and I learn something every day.
Sorry to correct you.
No, that's why you're here, is to correct me. For sure, you're here to correct me. That's exactly what this is all about. Because I will be the first one to say, I love learning, and I say some things sometimes that people go, no, and it changes very rapidly.
Yeah.
When you look at, I always love it every year when they come out with your ROIs on different projects, and how if you look at last year compared to this year, it's completely different.
Oh,
it was kitchens and baths, and now it's basement. It's always something. They're always, because we evolve, right? And sure, old inventory changes. So if everybody does a kitchen remodel in old inventory, then obviously the demand for that is less, because more people have upgraded it.
Right.
And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see what comes out of kind of what's happening right now, because people are busy. Contractors are busy. The industry is, because we're home, right?
Sure.
So now you've looked for, 3 months at that crack in the wall, or the outside backyard that you've been forced to sit in, and go, I gotta do something with this backyard. I gotta put a deck on. I gotta redo the landscaping, or the bathroom that you've been in for that.
Oh yeah. Well, when we went through tough times, it was more of the needs that people ended up doing. Now it seems like there's a lot more of the wants that people are starting to end up doing as well. I mean, from our perspective, the need used to end up being roofing. I mean, when your roof is bad, you have no choice. You got to replace it. That's what's protecting everything else in your house. The wants are, you know what? My windows really look old. I've been wanting them, but it's not really needed. Now people are going, yeah, you know what? I'm ready to upgrade those windows. Get myself something that, yes, is more energy efficient, but looks better as well. And it's those kind of things. Or siding. I mean, a lot more people these days are looking at their siding projects and updating the outside of their houses, because, they're getting outside and going around their home, because they've been looking at those four walls for months.
And I think I've talked a lot about the maintenance of siding that people don't really, and I think, again, this is a whole segment. We will get into siding, I'm sure, at one day down the road here. But I mean, maintenance, people don't realize the caulking and the painting of areas that needed to get painted that you left. And I think, to your point, we're walking around now going, oh yeah, I was supposed to do that. Ooh, I didn't.
I guess that woodpecker has really done some serious damage to
and
that
now
side.
I hear him every day too.
Right.
Usually I'm not home when he's doing it, so it doesn't bother me. I see the holes, but I go, whatever. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, because a lot of upgrading. Because there's not much to do. What I mean by usually we're spending money on going out, we're on vacations. And so what I'm hearing is that people are now saying, well, I've set that money aside for this year's vacation, but we're not going to do that. And it's just, the reality is we just won't now. We're coming into, school starting up again, and they aren't going to do it. So now they're taking that money and investing it back in their house, which at the same time, the markets are doing really well. So as far as your house value is going up, at the same time, investment, you're in a perfect storm right now. If it wasn't for the fact that, contractors are at a shortage, and material
prices are
going crazy. I was talking with a buddy last night. He had 2 landscapers out to just do some grading work in his house. October of 21.
Wow.
They're booked. Both of them were booked to October of 21.
We're actually looking at deck work for next year. We're not doing any more decks anymore this year.
Well, can you find decking material? Because one of the hottest things in the market right now that's missing is decking material.
Right.
That's
the
crazy.
2x4s, 2x6s, 2x10s, 2x everything is just a problem. OSB boards, the prices of those things have just skyrocketed. But it's, it is what it is. I mean, we can't control that. All we want to end up doing is making sure that we can end up completing a project and doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a healthy way. What's fun and exciting
else? Well,
you know what we didn't talk about today is attics.
We didn't talk about ventilation, which you had
said we were going to talk about. So let's talk about ventilation. You got kind of sidetracked, and you're going to find that's kind of the fun part about this is kind of hitting the topics that we think are important. Material. That's another one we could spend a whole afternoon on, the shortage, because I don't think people out there realize what's happened. But let's get to ventilation.
Okay.
I find that this topic changes. It seems every time I talk to you, I learn something new about something, and you're like, yeah, well. So let's kind of narrow ventilation down, because it's a really long word to begin with. So let's see if we can't narrow it down to specifically maybe in the smaller home market. Because I think I was chatting with you the other day about my little Cape Cod. And I think there's a lot of people that have the smaller second stories that were really never meant to be second stories. They kind of acquired that space. And I think there's always the question in my mind, it's the HVAC versus the ventilation. Everybody goes, it's the HVAC guys say it's a ventilation problem, and the ventilating guys say, well, it's because you don't have enough ductwork to the second floor. But what really, I guess, in the scenarios you've run into in these type of built-in attics, with, again, you talked about knee walls earlier. We've got the smaller attic. Some of it's exposed to the rafters. What are you finding what is a kind of a scenario that would help us know good if we got bad ventilation, good ventilation already, or we have a major problem?
We'll start off with the word, it depends.
Yes, the classic line from any contractor, right? How much does it cost? It depends.
No, I mean, because there are so many different scenarios that end up going on. I have an email that's sitting on my computer right now from a homeowner who has a typical bungalow.
Okay.
Can you put truly an intake ventilation system into a structure of a bungalow from a soffit? Because those are blocked off. Those are completely sealed off. The makeup, the design, how they actually frame that thing out doesn't really give you good airflow coming up from down below into those areas. That's typically finished off. Do you agree?
Yeah. And I guess to describe, if you're not following what he's saying, so in the bungalow type design, you basically are taking the structure of the roof and you're almost applying directly to the structure underneath. So if you've ever walked into a space that's got like the sloped ceilings, even if it's a knee wall up and then a slope ceiling, but point being is that you're basically applying the roofing material on the top of the rafter and some sort of finished material on the bottom of the rafter, wedging that. And so what Randy's describing is that how do you get from what we'll call like the soffits or where the gutters are at,
right,
how do you get airflow up to the actual peak? And that's what he's saying is the challenge in these, because in theory, you've got, in most cases, 5.5 inches.
And it's not opened.
It's not open, right?
It's all blocked off because there's wood that's in there and it's all sealed off. And when a contractor ends up coming in and saying, oh, we're a roofer, you got to ventilate because manufacturer ends up telling us we have to end up doing this, it's really not going to happen. I mean, you'd have to end up doing a lot more work inside those soffitted areas in order to open that up, in order for that to actually end up flowing to get then to the upper section past the knee wall. And you have to open that section up in order for that venting actually to end up working. So it's not as simple as, well, just cut a strip into the soffit and you're fine.
Have you ever gotten that? I've walked into, my living room. Hey, look, there's moisture there. So it means it's not getting through to the attic.
No, it's a roof leak. I always get it. It's a roof
It's
leak.
a roof leak.
Right. Actually, no, it's a condensation problem that you got going on more than likely. So let's discuss.
Wait, doesn't that bring us full circle back to ventilating inside the house and the moisture contents and humidity?
Potentially, yes. We're right back to where we began.
And I think that's fun too, because when you look at it, it really proves, when we talked at the very beginning of the show about how everything's intermixed.
Yeah.
It really isn't. And so I sometimes get frustrated with that exact statement that you said. Well, there's a roof leak someplace.
Yeah.
And to be fair, everybody listening out there, if you're not knowledgeable in that subject area, that's probably a viable thought process. Like, I see water, it's got to be a leak.
It's got to be.
And so that's what these series are about. It's all about educating and talking and making people more aware. I think the last thing that I want to kind of filter or kind of end on is window moisture. Because you're in the window market, this is an easy conversation to have with you. Is I get called in a lot of times to evaluate, well, there's something wrong with the window because I'm seeing moisture on the window.
Yep.
And you've probably never heard that, right?
All the time. Especially when we end up coming in towards those winter months. And yes, those condensation, those areas where you're seeing water typically end up being in the lower corners, right?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Lower left, lower right, or right in between if you're talking a double hung, maybe in that upper sash, same spot, lower left, lower right. And in a lot of cases, homeowners are going, must be leaking. That window must not be working real well because I see the water that's in there. It's a condensation. What you actually have, those are the coldest points of your home area to the outside, or allow enough of that air leakage where it's causing the same condensation as if you took a water or a soda can out of a refrigerator or a water bottle out of the refrigerator, let it sit for a second. Now all of a sudden you see the water droplets. A lot of simple ways that you can end up doing to end up making that, for one, open up your blinds because it needs to circulate that air so that more of that is moving around. For two, if there's any of those little latches, safety latches that are in the windows, open those things up, because those will actually end up allowing just enough of the outside cold air that it's not going to end up forcing those issues.
Wait, did you just say that you told me to open my window a little bit to actually get rid of a moisture problem?
Believe it or not, you need to actually have air movement in the house to the outside, fresh air.
Everybody, did you hear that? I mean, and I say that not to kind of be like sarcastic, but
yes, it is.
But it is sarcastic. I mean, that's just me. That's
right.
How I am. But it's that kind of logic though that people go, well, then there's something. I mean, if I have to open my window, then there has to be something wrong with the window.
No,
and it isn't. It's about the science behind why we're having these issues, and they always historically I get, well, my old windows didn't do that. Okay, well, think about your old windows. Why did you replace them?
Because they leak.
Right.
There's air.
And so
leakage.
we just told you to crack the window to allow some of that. Well, you didn't have that because the environment in which that was in before with the old windows leaked naturally.
Exactly.
So you didn't need to crack that. I think the other one that I always kind of advise people on, that especially over a phone call, what's around that window? I historically have gone in over the years and seen this is where all your plants are. Again, we talked about plants earlier, about the moisture that they give. They're by a fish tank. Again, we're talking about areas that have a higher moisture count. Like, even though you can get rid of it through the systems in your house, that particular points are going to be, you put plants by windows, right? I mean, inherently they need light. So this is a perfect opportunity, but then you get to that, it's that's transitioning time frame, that's spring to summer, and that, fall to winter, where you've got this you're talking about earlier. How do you get in that? You haven't gotten the moisture content down yet because we are not into winter far enough, and you're in this transitional period. And notoriously, that's when I'll get the calls.
Right. And where's your heat vent usually? right at the base. So now,
And it's by design.
of
I mean,
course,
people don't realize that either. Like, it's not placed there because that they felt like in the room that was the best place to put it. Is that you want the air movement in front of the windows, and then of course, I mean, to be fair, I've done it too. Not thinking, I put the plants on the shelves on top of the vent.
That's a good spot.
Right? Like, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, here I'm the guy who should know better, right? But in here, well, my wife wanted the plants by the window, and we wanted the shelf there, and never even dawned on me until I got moisture on it. And I'm like, so I mean, and all it takes, honestly, I moved it out 2 inches. All of a sudden, the airflow gets in front of the window again. We're good to go.
No blinds in the way.
Yeah, it's those kind of those things that we want to be out talking about. This is exactly what this show is all about. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to our many more conversations in the future. Is there anything you want to wrap up with anybody that's listening?
No, it's funny because you and I end up having these kind of conversations, just never been on camera before.
Exactly. And this is a lot of fun because these kind of conversations I've had with contractors for ever since Step Beyond Green started, but more importantly in the last 3 to 4 years. And I want to get out these conversations to you, the audience, because I think they're not being talked about in the way that we're going to talk about them. And so this show is all about engaging at a different level. And I look forward to lots more of these with all of you in the future. Thanks for listening.